Hello and welcome to Catamount Radio and the Catamount Community Connection public affairs program here. I'm Brian Collamore, the host of the show, which runs each Sunday for an hour. And we speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. Our program is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair now at Rutland since 1846. That, ladies and gentlemen, is 178 years. And the goal of the program, as it is each week, to inform and make our listeners aware of things that are going on in Rutland County and throughout the state. Maybe a new law or regulation that went into effect. Most of the legislation that was passed in the session just concluded did take effect on July 1st. We've talked a little bit about some of those and other programs focusing on events that we hope are just fun and that folks will want to know about. We want to thank Mike Pichak, our state treasurer, for being our guest last week. And we had a lot of good information about some of the programs that his office will be trying to put into place in the next few months, for sure. Today, we are happy to welcome in, and it's our kind of monthly visit, although I didn't look back, Michael, but I don't think you came in July. I could be wrong.
No, I don't think I was here.
Yeah, let me turn your mic on.
Oh, there. No, I don't think I was here.
No, so it isn't technically a monthly check-in as I thought it should be, but we, for some reason, we had a lot of other things going on in July, so we are going to check in with the mayor of the city of Rutland, Mike Doenges, for the next hour or so. One of the things that has become pretty obvious over the last several years are the repeated incidents of storms and the severe weather events that seem now to be, you know, at one time when we had Irene, we said, well, phew, we got by that. That'll be another 100 years before that happens again. Then it happened. And now it's 50 years, and now I don't know if it's going to be every year. I mean, it wasn't, cross our fingers, it wasn't as intense or destructive in Rutland County as some of the past events. But certainly in the middle of the state, they did have some serious issues. So it does seem like storms are happening more often.
It does, and the severity is what has us kind of gun shy, right? We've always kind of seen weather, but the severity of that weather is a lot different than it used to be. And I think, you look at that what was a hurricane that became a tropical storm that came through it'll be a couple weeks back now, right? And Rutland fared well, but 2 days before that, we got winds from the northeast or the northwest, and it took out a bunch of trees because we don't see winds from that direction very often. So we're starting to see all of these different things affect us in different ways. So we've been talking internally at the city about how do we make sure we're in a good place as these storms get worse. Because if you look across the country, certain areas are used to storms like that. So, in Ohio, we lived out there for a while, they have massive storm drain systems and huge culverts and retention ponds all over the place, right? Because when they get downpours, their ground is usually dry and it doesn't saturate very well and it's a lot of clay, so they need a place to put it. So they think about that in their design. Well, New England was built a long time ago and we don't necessarily have those things in place. So at the city, we've been really considering how do we remediate or how do we prevent or build so that when these storms come through that they aren't causing problems for the municipality, right? The state of Vermont has a couple of programs, and one of them is the flood hazard mitigation program. And there's about $90 million. A lot of that's federal money. Actually, I think most of it is sitting in a fund. And year to year, that's anywhere between 10 and 14 million. That changes. But there's 90 million sitting in that fund. And historically, for the past 35 years or so, Rutland hasn't been eligible for that fund, Brian. And the main reason is we didn't have something called a local hazard mitigation plan. So this is a plan that basically identifies all of our culverts, all of our bypasses, anything that where if there was a hazard of any kind, where our assets and resources are and where our potential problems are. So we're going through that process finally. I can't speak to why previous administrations didn't do it. It is a time-consuming process. It does take some work. And usually the benefits are, hey, if there is a FEMA incident and FEMA pays you back, they pay back 80% and then the city pays the 20%. Well, with the LHMP or that local hazard mitigation plan, we would get 90% and only have to pay 10%. but it also opens up the door to all these grant opportunities where we can, instead of waiting for a disaster to happen, we can actually apply for those funds and get them to solve problems before they happen. Widening our culverts. One of our major issues is most of our culverts were built in the 40s. So they're super thin. So as we have Moonbrook and East Creek and Otter Creek all running through the city, the culverts that run around those, luckily Otter Creek's okay, but the culverts that run around the other ones aren't. And we've been replacing them as we go. But now with these funds, that's one of the things we can do. And why that's important is those become the bottlenecks during the storms, right? Sometimes they get clogged, but even if they don't, they're still not wide enough to let enough water flow through. So we're looking at that. We're working with our engineering department to really focus on what needs to be done in the city and what can be done in the next 2 or 3 years. And then we're going to apply for those grants coming up here real soon and let the state know, hey, look, we're absolutely interested in upgrading our systems, because the city is surrounded by and has water running through it. And in another major incident, we could see the same damage, if not worse, than we saw with Irene.
Yeah, I'm looking back or trying to remember back. It was probably 2, maybe 3 years ago, and I referenced Gouger Hill because that's one of those things that just stuck in my head from reading about why they called it Gouger Hill, by the way,
right,
and where it was. So it's at the bottom of what is South Main Street now. And at one time, the Midway Diner was there, Tire Warehouse was there. I'm just giving people a point of reference. Gouger, by the way, from what I can remember reading, there was a drinking establishment, and as people would walk by it to go down the hill, they would gouge people's eyes out or something. That's what I always heard. I don't know if that's true.
Wow, I got to look up the history on that.
So Gouger Hill became a reference point for that area of the city. But a couple, 3 years ago, and I remember Congresswoman Ballant came up. Yep. You and I were on that tour because right at the bottom of that, and I'm not
Clover
sure
Street.
which
Clover.
which brook is going through there. Is that Moonbrook or?
Yeah,
no?
I think that's Moonbrook. I'm looking right now. I never remember.
But yeah, you're right. Like a shopping cart and a limb of a tree and something else got stuck in the culvert, and all of a sudden it backed up, and that's what initially caused a huge flood and some destruction of homes. In fact, I drove by the other day, and they're still working on 2 or 3 of the homes that are in that area to fix them up.
Yeah, they are, and it's interesting because some of those homes are older, and they already needed maintenance. So when you get flooded, especially if your insurance company doesn't cover it, to get the power turned back on, that's one of the biggest things. You need to be up to code. So even if you weren't up to code, 2020s code, and you're up to 1970s code, well, guess what? Now you got to make those renovations. So that's what's taking some of the time over there. But that's exactly the type of things that this money will afford the city, is the ability to, in the cases where a person living in the home is willing to sell, we can buy those homes up, we can turn them into lots, we can put retention ponds, we can put drainage systems. There are FEMA programs for that, and for the first time ever, Rutland is eligible, and that's awesome.
Okay. And speaking of Congresswoman Ballant, she was up when this airs on Sunday the 18th, she will have been here a couple of weeks back, but she came up to Templewood Court and presented the Rutland Housing Authority, I believe is the correct pronunciation.
That's correct.
Identification of that, with a check for about $650,000 to upgrade their electrical system. And it was great to see her again. She and I came into the Vermont State Senate the same year in 2015, and we've always gotten along well. We often don't agree on policy issues, but we certainly respect each other greatly, and it was great to see her. And I'm sure Kevin Loso and the group down there is appreciative of the money to get that updated.
Yeah, they ran into, speaking of electrical issues, they ran into some challenges with the electrical system there, again, not being up to code. And although they probably love to do all sorts of different things, those critical pieces of infrastructure are important. So that's what they applied for that congressionally directed spending for, and it was great. It was nice to have her there. We had a good conversation too. It was a very very on point conversation. And for those who don't follow Becca in the House, she focuses on housing a lot, and it's a very pointed conversation on what we need for housing and the supports around subsidized housing. And when we say supports, when you look at subsidized housing, in the past, it's just been, here's a house at a discounted rate, or an apartment at a discounted rate, or here's a voucher. And now we look at it, and with so many changes to the healthcare system and so many changes to state-supported mental health, now housing is becoming the place where people get their resources. So we were having this nice conversation about, how do you build supports into the systems? And in Rutland, we have 2 locations where that already exists. So we have Bridge Housing, which is also a Rutland Housing Authority project. And then we have Lincoln Place, which is a Rutland Housing Trust, not to confuse the listeners, but we have a lot of these groups. Yeah. But Rutland Housing Trust, and both of those have assistance from Rutland Mental Health, which is part of the community care network in those locations, because when you start to look at who you're housing with subsidies, sometimes there's a need for extra assistance. And the systems are changing, Brian. I mean, we remember back in the day when Waterbury housed a lot of people that had struggles and challenges, and that doesn't exist anymore, and it's all offices now. So as those systems change, and although it might be long and arduous, and we would have hoped to see some of these things in place 10, 15 years ago, we're starting to see things take shape in the communities where the supports are needed.
So getting back to the group that's meeting, yes. I'm assuming that Mr. Protovansky is part of that group, maybe the Planning Commission. When we talk about getting together with local folks who can come up with a plan to mitigate the severity of the storms that we seem to be getting. Gosh, it seems like every summer there's something.
Yeah, so the group that's working on it primarily, we work internally first. So we want to do all the research. So that's Bob Protovansky. He's our city public works commissioner. Yep. And then we have Ted Gillen. And Ted is our city engineer, along with we've got Pete Kelly, and Pete is Pete is our city engineering technician. And Pete knows, if you want to know something about what's underground in the city, or above ground for that matter, just go ask Pete, because he knows everything about where everything is. So, but they're going to work on kind of looking at those locations, and then we will bring that to potentially the board and the planning commission, and depending on what we need to do. So the planning commission would get things like, do we want to take over these houses in this area? The board will likely get just any of the changes we would want to make to the culverts. And when we come up with that plan, we also have to remember, it's great if we can plan it, it's great if we can get the money, but are the crews around to do the work? We have our own staff, which is great, and they're out actually on one of the roads right now fixing valves, which is fantastic to see them out there. But at the same time, they're busy doing other projects. So are the contractors that we work with available to actually do that work too? So we have to put it out to bid. It's a long process, but if we can start to change the shape of those waterways in Rutland to support when these big storms hit, that's the goal. Is yes, it's a big storm, and yes, the waters rose, but it didn't damage any property. People could still get, you might have to go a different route because the road's a little flooded, but people are still able to stay in their homes, and you don't have to have these big long-winded repairs. It
seems like one of the real stress points, if I can remember back, 10, a dozen years ago, as you come down the West Street Hill and the parking deck, every time there was something that was really above average in terms of rainfall, it seemed like that was a point at which there was, you put sandbags up and you try to sort of divert the water around, but I'm not sure whether that is still an issue or not.
It sort of is, but we've done some things to make it a little bit better already, and then we're working on a couple of things that'll solve the problem, so to speak. So Rutland City, our wastewater system and our stormwater system are combined. So you used to hear maybe a few years ago, you see it in the paper every once in a while, after a big storm, they'd say sewage flows into the river, right? And we have these overflow points, and it's before it ever gets to the wastewater treatment plant. And that doesn't happen as much anymore. But our combined sewer system, called combined sewer overflows is actually what they're combined.
CSO,
yeah. That happens when there's heavy, heavy rainfall because those systems are combined. So one of the things that we did downtown specifically is we cleaned out the old wastewater pipes. They're not really pipes. If you ever watch a movie where people are walking around under New York City in the sewage tunnels, that's what they look like. I mean, ours are different. They're made out of marble. They're very old. But we went out and did a lot of cleaning in downtown. One, helps eliminate the smell, but two, it allows for more flow. The system is also used for storage. So in a big storm, that water will sit in there until it can get processed out and flow through. So what you'll notice now is during these big storms with the heavy rainfall, the parking garage doesn't flood like it used to, and that's because we cleaned a lot of that out. But what we have on the docket ready to go, and there's grant money and ARPA funds to get it done already, is a big storage project. So about 1 million gallon storage tank under Meadow Street Park.
Oh.
And so the idea of that is those big storms with a lot of rainfall, and all of that can flow into this storage tank, and then we just wait to process that at our wastewater treatment facility until we have the capacity to do it. So that should solve a lot of the combined sewer overflow issues, and that should also solve some of the heavy storm flooding, downtown flooding issues that we see. It's very interesting because, like you said, it's on the bottom of West Street Hill, it's Center Street Hill, everything goes downhill and then levels out right there.
Yep.
And when it levels out, that's where it's all going to go down, is towards Meadow Street. And I know that seems boring and technical, but the idea behind it is we are still looking at plans to either do separation in certain areas, so the stormwater and the wastewater in two different pipes, so to speak. And the other thing that, again, back to engineering, right? So our DPW department, along with our engineers, we're looking at additional storage in a few other areas. And what's cool about the additional storage, so if we have a 1 million gallon tank under, say, Meadow Street Park, and we do, let's say, something massive over by Calvary Cemetery. So off the back of Calvary Cemetery, we already have some surplus space back there. We have some pipes back there. If we did a big storage over there, one, it would save us money on our separation projects. Separation projects are very expensive. Got to tear up the road, put in new pipes. It's a long process, and it's very expensive to do. Storage is a lot less expensive, and we can process that later. But two, it helps with the sewer overflows. It helps with the flooding, especially in the low-lying areas with storage. But the other thing that it does is it would potentially allow us to tell 3-acre rule participants, hey, you can take your stormwater and put it into the city system, and then you don't have to pay those impact fees. We need the capacity to be able to do that first, but if we can do that, it's a big win for Rutland City businesses and property owners, because now they don't have to pay these impact fees. They don't have to look. When you're in a city, and I know we're small as far as cities go, Brian, but when you're in a city, things are tight. So if someone's going to build, let's say, a hotel, for example, where are they going to put the stormwater from that hotel? Mm-hmm. They have to have a plan for that. Well, because we're a municipality and because we can take that water and it goes through our wastewater treatment facility, which, by the way, has plenty of capacity, that stormwater can then be considered treated by the state, and now they have a treatment plan and we have a customer. So looking at storage is something that our administration has been really focused on for the past year and a half, and we're looking at how we're going to engineer that out, because that could actually be Rutland's answer to both the 3-acre rule and the flooding issues that we see when we have heavy rainfall.
I can think of one customer that would be delighted to be able to take part in that, and that's the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which is the fair,
yes,
the Vermont State Fair, and they are unfortunately surrounded by land that they can't do anything with, and they're really in a tough position down there.
Yeah, and we do have wastewater systems that run through there. So if they could get creative about how, if this works out, if the plan that we're looking at calculates out math-wise, both financially and from a gallons flow perspective, we could maybe someday, in a year or two, say to the fair, hey, just fill out this form. We'll calculate your gallons. If we're good to go, we'll charge you a small permit fee, and you can put your stormwater into the system. And what we're looking at, because we do have to process that and treat it, is saying to anybody who's going to use that, there's a small per inch of rainfall fee. So it would still cost, they're looking at millions of dollars to remediate right now. Yeah. And, if we look at our plan, we could say we could do it for, hundreds of thousands, but over 10 years, right? So much less, very, very inexpensive in comparison to what we're looking at with some of the regulation that's come down through DEC.
Someone's bound to tell Robert Congdon that we were talking this way. I'm hoping that we can at least provide some communication with him so it doesn't take him by surprise, because it is a serious matter.
I'll text him when we're done here so we can talk about it.
The other thing you mentioned, Meadow Street, and it's kind of like stream of consciousness, and I'm thinking,
it's great.
I don't think we ever got a chance to thank the folks who participated in National Night Out at Meadow Street Playground this year. I went down. I saw you were down there as well. Maybe spent an hour or two just kind of walking around, and they had, I'm trying to think, I heard 25, 30 vendors maybe. Most of the nonprofits in the county had some sort of representation there. Local law enforcement was there for sure. Both the state police and city police were there with their vehicles. The kids had a ball with the bouncy houses and all that kind of stuff. So the rec department must have put that on, right? I mean, that's their thing.
So it's actually a combination. It's it's really kind of a police effort.
Okay.
But in Rutland, we do a committee. So the committee is made up of the rec department, the fire, a member from the fire department, and a member from PD. And then there's a whole crew that goes behind it and puts it together. So, and the rec department's a huge part. So our first responders and our rec department put it on. It was the biggest and best one yet. It keeps getting bigger every year. It's so funny because I'm standing there looking around, hundreds of people, tons of kids, families from every corner of Rutland, which is great. And from outside too. We had some visitors from outside, but it was mostly Rutland residents, which was awesome. And you hear all the time the saying, there's nothing to do in Rutland. But Brian, you do something like that and everybody shows up. You do something like Friday Night Live, everybody's there. There's tons to do around here. You just have to find it. Yeah. You know what I mean? But the turnout was phenomenal. The reception was great. They had all the like police and fire vehicles lined up, and they did a competition on who had the best lights and sirens, and Rutland City PD won, which was awesome to hear. And then they had the fire trucks with the fire hoses, and the kids could knock out fire. Just to see those kids out there having a great time with their families was awesome, and the food was really good too.
And I've got a soft spot since I interviewed him on the show, Emilio Rosario, who is the downtown city police person, was there, and he just has such a great way about him. And I saw him interact with people that I don't know how I would have gone up and introduced myself and sort of started the communication, but he just has a way about him, and he's got a full uniform on, and some people were maybe taken aback at one point, maybe, but not anymore. He does a great job. He's a great guy.
He's phenomenal, and he's a key component. Like, he leads the PD in putting that event together with the rec. So he's a key component there. And you're right, Brian. Emilio is, we have, I gotta back up for a second. Our police department is absolutely amazing. We have some of the best men and women on the force you could possibly imagine, and Rutland is lucky and blessed to have them. And when you look at Emilio is a good representation of a lot of our officers. He's super friendly. He's always willing to listen. They take a path of, we understand, when there's a confrontation or anything that's going on that's negative, they always take a path of understanding first. They try to understand the situation before they address it. They try to bring people down to a level of communication. So that's the day-to-day. And then outside of the day-to-day, just the friendliness, the outgoing, the approachability, that is our department, and Emilio does a good job representing it. So thanks for calling him out.
Yeah. So that was a great event. I really enjoyed it. I'll definitely be there in years to come. And it was a perfect location. I mean, not to take anything away from Georgetti Park, where it was for a number of years, but it's just not big enough to hold it there. And the Meadow Street playground was perfect for it.
And we had people parking all the way up River Street. Oh, yeah. And it was great. So, yeah, it was a perfect spot.
We're talking to Rutland Mayor Mike Doenges. We need to take our first break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we are coming right back. We are back on Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, your host of this one-hour show each and every Sunday. And thanks to the folks who are listening and letting me know that you're hearing our show each week. We do appreciate that. The show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has now brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And if you do the math, that means 178 fairs have taken place And the Rutland County Agriculture Society has sponsored them all the way along. So we've talked a little bit about storms, the increased, occurrence of that, and also the severity therein, which caused problems for all kinds of municipalities, all kinds of states. I don't know what we're ever going to be able to do about it. Certainly in Vermont, if everybody changed their pattern and did something different, it really wouldn't amount to much at all, folks. I hate to break the news to you, but in other words, we're not going to be able to change the weather pattern in Vermont just by doing things differently. I mean, we can plan for stuff. That's one way to do it, but we can't really change the
and we already are doing things differently in Vermont. We've already made those choices. We're quite green as a state. So the only thing that we can do, since the rest of the world affects our weather, is we can plan for what's to come. And you know what? There's no negative in over-engineering things, Brian, right? If we have a bigger culvert than we need and the weather gets better over time, then we're ready for whatever's to come. And I think we just need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, you mentioned the Waterbury situation years ago with Irene. I think it was Irene that affected them. Mm-hmm. And so they came in. That's where, of course, the state hospital was, all kinds of state office buildings. And they took a look at, the culvert sizes and how to sort of do things differently when they put things back together. And I will say the last 2 or 3 storms, they did get hammered up there, but there was no damage and no long-lasting results of that. So it does show that if you plan well, you're in much better shape. And
our neighbors to the east, Killington, they are doing that too, right? Even as they got Bear Mountain Road washed out, they planned for the bigger culverts. FEMA says, hey, you need the 25-year culverts. That's what we'll pay to replace. They're like, we're going to the 50, 100-year because they keep seeing this and they just know that they're going to need to be prepared. So they push a little harder on that.
So here's a favorite topic that we haven't talked about yet today, housing. And I know there is a meeting coming up in September, so probably about, let's see, if this airs on the 18th, I think it's a month to the day in September. And this is more for developers, right?
Yeah, so we're putting together, it was a developer conference. It's actually more of a, like a summit. And the idea behind it is we're calling on developers from Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Massachusetts, to come to Rutland and learn about how to develop here in our region. And some of them already know, which is great, but we want to talk about the advantages of doing that. So in the past few years, a couple things have happened. One, it's become favorable from a financial standpoint to develop in the community, right? Rents have gone up a little bit, which is good, which means now the math pencils out for a developer. Two, we've got a group of, both whether it's in the aldermen or the residents or my administration, a group of development friendly, especially around housing, development friendly individuals that are all in places to help move things along and help get things done. And then you also have what's gone on at the state. This year we really pushed, or you really pushed at the state to get some stuff done around Act 250, and Rutland in short order will be considered mostly Tier 1A, which means that you can develop without having to go through the Act 250 process. And when you put all those things together, along with favorable financing options, a focus on housing from the state, it makes us ripe for development. The other thing is it costs less. Even though we're a smaller community, it costs less to do a bigger development here than, say, in Boston or in Newburyport, Mass, or in Albany. And the reason is land acquisition is cheaper here. It really is less expensive. And although the sales tax may, be the same in comparison, you can certainly get materials for the same price, and you can certainly build in less time because you don't have to deal with as many regulations, because it's different when you're building in a major city than it is when you're building in a smaller one. So that time to develop is so expensive for developers, and they know that time is an advantage when they can speed up the process. So if we can basically show them the sites that are available, talk about the systems that they can connect to. So we have water, we have wastewater, we have, high-speed internet, all these things, all the things that we can offer, and show the advantages of doing it in a profitable way in Rutland. We think that, let's say we get 30 developers to come to this summit, or we invite 30, let's say 10 show up. Let's say out of that 10, two of them decide to develop 100 units of housing in Rutland. That's 200 units of housing that we didn't have before. So that's the goal. It's not just to, get 30 brand new units up. It's to expose those developers to Rutland and what it means to develop here, and show them that this is a place that they can build and make some money, which is what they want to do. They're in they're private businesses, and make some money here and do it, and maybe even be more profitable in building something, say, in a major area. So
interesting. And I know that the 3 Rutland County senators got invitations to attend, and I'm hoping the House members will also find their way that day. It's at the Hub Co-works, and it's on the 18th of September. I think it starts at 9:30-ish.
Yeah, we're still working out the final agenda. We got about a month to go.
And it's a full day. We won't necessarily need, I don't think, to stay all day, but if you get developers there that are interested and they need more information, that's sort of where they can be most of the day to get it.
Yeah, and it's about the connections too. So if the representation, if the senators come or if some of the reps come for earlier in the day, make the connections. You can exchange cards. We saw how tightly Great Gulf for Killington needed to be tied to legislation to be able to get some stuff done. And they were able to get that worked out this year, I think, right? So that one change that they asked to be made in Vermont state law, which allows deposits to be looked at as down payments, I think is how it works out.
That's exactly it.
That's one of those things that just opened up Vermont to being more friendly to developers. That's huge. So these other developers can come in. So if they're going to build 100 units and there's 50 people that say, yeah, I'll put a deposit down on those units, now they can use that as leverage towards borrowing to build their building. And it's a big tool. So having those conversations, being available, making those connections on the network. We're going to have a couple of credit unions there too to talk about financing options. We're going to have a couple people from our planning commission. We'll have Ed from the RRA. Cedar's all going to be there. The idea basically to connect these developers to the resources as well, so they can get started on a high speed note.
Well, looking forward to it for sure. And I know there's projects. There's one in West Rutland that is beginning to happen, which is always exciting. I drove by on my way to Castleton over the weekend, and West Side is getting ready too, I think, to explode.
Yeah, and we want to share the love, right? West Rutland, Rutland Town, the Pittsford. Everybody's looking at different projects. West Rutland, the Housing Trust has got one going on. That's the one you're talking about, I think, is going on over there. Yep. Rutland Town, they still have the mall. And wouldn't it be great, even though it's not in the city, listen, wouldn't it be great if we could get some housing at the mall? Anything that's going to spur that kind of growth is what we're looking at. I had a great conversation. We were at the T-Mobile grand opening the other day. I was talking to the new manager and the district manager. The district manager was telling me that he's moved his family to Rutland, and the new manager moved to Rutland as well. So people are moving down here from Burlington. We've seen it a couple times just over the past few months. We want to grow because that's going to help the tax base, right? The more people I have to pay taxes, the better our community is going to be, because think about it this way, simple math, and we haven't talked about this in a while. If I can just say there's about 4,000 properties in Rutland right now that pay taxes. If I can make that 6,000, right? Just 6,000, and some of them are high value, like 100-unit apartment condo complexes. Think about what that does to the average Rutland citizen's tax bill.
Sounds like about 50% less.
That's the goal, right? And that's also on me to not raise municipal taxes as we do this, right? And the schools to stay level. If we can try to stay as level funded as possible, it does cut the rate. So growing the population here, growing the housing is important, but it's not coming without its challenges, Brian. So we're trying to find ways to work with new groups.
Yeah, for sure. I know you wanted to take at least a couple minutes to thank some of the city workers who have been laboring all summer. And it's funny, here it is August 18th, and summer's like going to be over soon.
I know, it's flown by.
It just seems like it got here, but I know they've been working on a lot of different things.
They have. Everything. They've been working on everything from, sidewalks are one of the biggest things I hear about. We have crews out there. We have two crews. We have our own city crew, and then we have a contractor that have been working on sidewalks all summer long, sidewalks and curbs. We've been doing all sorts of streets. with our contractors and our crews.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know if you... sorry.
No, I was stifling a yawn, but not because of what you're saying.
But I know streets aren't that interesting, but no, they're actually interesting to me. But some of the streets that were in most desperate need this year got done.
Yeah.
And so part of the calculation on when we're going to go do a road and repave a road is, when do we have to do the plumbing underneath the road? Are we separating the water and stormwater? Do we have old pipes? So sometimes these roads get put off and put off and put off because we know we need to do the plumbing, and why would we pave the road and just go back next year and do the plumbing? So Ted and Bob and I and a couple others sat down this early spring and said, are there things that we're not going to get to for 15 years where the roads are just in terrible shape and we need to do it? And Vernon, it was one of those roads, and we got to Vernon this year. Now, the plumbing still needs to be done under Vernon, but it's lower on the priority list. It'll survive for a while longer. So we might have to tear the road up in 15 years, but that's a good timeline for any asphalt, right? Is a 15-year timeline. So we really tried to prioritize the roads that were most in need. You saw us do Strongs last year. We have a couple more to go this summer before the season's over. And this is all while everything's happening with the state and all these other roads getting done. But I really wanted to say thank you to the road crews, to DPW, the water guys, because we're doing all these cross connects. So while the state's coming through, we're doing all these cross connects. Water and wastewater distribution and collection have been out there digging up roads at night, putting in new valves, putting in new cross connects to our bigger lines, so that once the state is done paving their pieces, we aren't having to dig up the road again. So we're upgrading the things we need to upgrade. We're really doing some forward thinking and planning. And not only that, but they're just out there like crushing it, even outside a normal regular schedule, because those are the only times we have available to do it. So big thanks to DPW. And then in the same vein, it's been a really busy summer for police and fire. Fire's a little bit understaffed right now because a couple of people are out. And so they've been, we've got guys working overtime, and we really appreciate them because they're always looking out for the city and keeping an eye on what's going on there. And they've been up and down trucks. Man, the fire department has dealt with everything from welds that need to get fixed on their ladder truck to, we're having one truck completely rebuilt. So they've really been stretched, but they've done a phenomenal job. And our PD, I don't know if you've noticed, Brian, but they are out in full force right now.
Yeah.
And, we've got some newer, younger officers, some real local Rutlanders that just came on the force too, which is great. And we've got some going into the academy, and it's just great to see how well, after such a challenge in staffing at the police department for so long, it's great to see the desire for people to come on to Rutland City PD, work with our officers, gain the experience, grow here, and we hope they stay as long as they can. But it's just nice to see our crew both recruit and retain some awesome officers, and they've done a phenomenal job over the past year. And then on the other side, on the non-sworn officer side, we also have the CRSs, which for those who don't know, in Rutland, we have this amazing tool in these community resource specialists, which is, in situations where maybe there's no crime happening or nobody's breaking the law, but you really have a person that's struggling, or maybe there's a mental health issue, or maybe there's just a challenge, or maybe there's an accident that they can go help at. These are non-sworn officers that go out and can meet people where they're at and try to help them deal with the situation that they're working on. And it's an added value. It came out of Project Vision. It's been something that we've been doing for many years, but we're up to 3 of those resource officers now, 1 sergeant and a commander, and it's such a great team to see in action, and I just want to say thank you to them too. That's all the outside stuff, when it comes to outside of City Hall, and then we have the rec, and then inside of City Hall. And I don't know if you've been to a Rutland City Park lately, but they're never in disrepair. Yeah, we've got Main Street Park, we got to do the gazebo, but our crews run the parks and the camps so well. We have programs. Our summer camp fills up, and it fills up fast. So we have a huge team of both full-time and part temporary summer workers that work on the camps, and then we also have our maintenance crew. Summer in Rutland is the busiest season both for all of those departments. So big thanks to them. And then I'll finish. I'm sorry to ramble on, but it's worth saying all this. Inside City Hall is just as busy too. So when you think about what happens in the summer, you get the new tax bill. So the treasurer's office is crazy busy. We have weddings and births and all sorts of stuff. And yes, the clerk's office always gets those. Those are year round. But summers are extra special, extra busy just because of everything that's going on there. So our treasurer and clerk's office are super busy in the summer. Same thing goes for our assessor's office and our building and zoning. And, we have DPW in City Hall too, and they're processing permits. It's hard to find a slow moment in City Hall or in any of our departments during the summer. So again, an extra special thanks goes out to those offices as well. It's worth it for people, your listeners, to know that the city is working for them, right? We are here to serve the Rutland citizen and beyond in all reality, but we're here to serve the Rutland citizen, and rarely do I get a complaint that people were underserved. It's very rare that I'll ever hear that people were dissatisfied or something was wrong or it didn't go the right way. And when we hear those things, we quickly can resolve them. But that's a testament to the hard work that everybody puts in to serve this community in such a great way.
Hopefully when people call, and I don't know whether all of the towns have had their property tax bills resolved and sent out or not. I received the Rutland town, because I live in the town, probably about 7 or 8 days ago. And I know the cities was out a little bit ahead of that. And I won't necessarily do the average well, but somewhere around 7 or 8% is what I think mine wound up being, for which I guess I'm very fortunate, because I kept hearing places like Killington were up 22, 23%.
That's right.
And I don't know where the city average was.
City came in just under 7% for Homestead. Non-Homestead was higher, but just under 7% for Homestead. So it was good. I mean, compared to everybody else, we would love to see it lower.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can remember the days when 1 or 2% you'd say, okay, that's good.
Yes. And let's be realistic about that, right? A raise in anything is hard. One of the phone calls I got directly to my office was this woman who's, she was already struggling, and to have to pay her a bigger tax bill was hard. And her tax bill only went up, $75 for the year, but it was still a painstaking process. So when the cost of everything has gone up, cost of bread, the cost of milk, and I know people use those as a common thing to talk about, but they're a good comparison, right? It's hard to get another bill that's gone up, but everybody, the state and all these municipalities, had to play catch up on all that inflation, and that's what people are getting hit with this year.
So hopefully when they call, they don't kill the messenger, or at least they're not rude to the messenger, because your city clerk has nothing to do with what wound up on your bill.
Our clerks and treasurers are always dealing with the challenges, but whether they are getting a little bit of the heat at the beginning, by the time the call's over, people understand what really happened.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take whatever responsibility I had. I voted against the bill, but it still passed, and that's the way things go. Okay, so we're talking to Rutland Mayor Mike Doenges here on Catamount Community Connection. I do believe we need to take one more break, and we will be back with the final, 12, 13 minutes in just a moment. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly 1-hour public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. I'm your host, Brian Collamore, and with us today is Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges. And we've talked about the storms. We've talked a little bit about housing and the big movement, or not the big movement, the big meeting for developers coming up on September 18th. And let's talk a little bit about what most people have been noticing as they drive around the city all summer as the state comes in and repaves it. It's almost getting to be like, almost not a video game, but some sort of challenge to avoid the manholes that pop up. And I see people swerving in and out, and then they just missed another one. And so eventually they'll get the top coat on, and then we'll begin our striping, if that's the correct term, our striping process. When is all that going to happen?
So we're going to continue. It's phased, obviously, right? So some streets are actually done, right, with the paving. So now they just need the striping. So Woodstock Ave, which is the one that is going to get their lane reconfiguration, or one of the two that is going to, it's going to get restriped August 23rd, probably the evening of August 23rd, which is a Friday. So Saturday morning, you'll see the new configuration. All the signs and the lights and the arrows and the directions will all be correct. And I do want to take a second to call out, that's different than last time. So when we did this 10 years ago, they redid the configuration halfway through. They restriped the roads, didn't change any of the signs, didn't change any of the lights, didn't align any lights, and it created a lot of havoc. So that's why we think it's going to be, part of the reason we think it's going to be a little bit different this time is all of that work is going into and going to be done on the 23rd. So you'll wake up on the 24th and you'll see the road reconfigured. We'll have signs out in advance. Actually, the airing of today's show is perfect timing because it's right around the time that the signs are going to go out.
This coming Friday then.
Exactly right. So it's right around the corner. Still have North Main Street to do, and that'll be later in the season. Not much later, but probably sometime in late September, early October, I'm guessing, just based on the information I have now. It could change too. That date is very dependent on making sure we have equipment in place and whatnot. So if it's not going to be the 23rd, keep an eye on the signs, keep an eye on the paper and your email to see if that changed. Things like West Street, South Main Street, all the places where the manhole covers are still sticking up a little bit, those are going to get their top coats as we continue to go. It's weather dependent. What happens is they do that first coat. It's called the shim coat. And then crews will come in and adjust the height of those manholes so that when you pave over that final coat, everything's even. That's the goal. Take some time. You have to, you've seen some of these streets, like there can be 14 manholes in a quarter mile. So it takes a little bit of work. And that's what they're doing most nights when you see them out there jackhammering up or digging up the road, the asphalt they just put down. They're just doing a small area, raising that manhole, soft patching it, and then, or just, shoring it up. And then when they do that final coat, it'll be covered. So all that underground utility work is all done at that point. And then we'll go back to the final striping. So one of the cool things, though, and I don't know if anybody noticed this, but this is something that I worked on out of my office, and we wanted to make sure happened and this changed. But if you come down West Street to turn on to Merchants Row, there is now a dedicated left-hand turn lane. And I have had people calling nonstop. At least once a day I get a call about people excited about the fact that now there's the lanes are, it's a left-hand turn that's dedicated and a right straight. And the traffic has been flowing on West Street better than it has in years because of that. So little changes like that will make positive impacts, and we'll continue to see that as the project finishes up. Yeah,
I have to agree. It was one of those things I did notice right off, and I went, wow. Why didn't we do that a long time ago? Because what would happen, it's a double lane there if you're heading
That's right.
West.
That's right.
And a lot of times if you're out in the middle of Merchants Row with your left blinker on, I know because I talked to law enforcement, it was against the law to go around that car and try to continue on West Street. So you basically were backed up waiting for this person, and it inevitably seemed like it was somebody that didn't really operate too quickly, and they would just
always
stay there, and you wanted to go around them, but it is against the law to do that, and it also is dangerous because you could create quite an accident with it. So anyway, the first time I went there, I went, wow. That's a really good idea.
It's almost like a relaxing feeling. Yeah. And it's called a geometry change for the intersection. And it was something that actually, if you look, everything kind of shifted a little to make that work, but it's working well. Even we thought we were going to lose 2 parking spots to do it. We ended up gaining like 1. So it actually worked out that there's even more parking down on West Street now too, which is good. And flowing traffic through West Street, you always see it kind of back up past the transit center in the evenings, especially at the end of the day around 3 or 4 o'clock. And that's not happening right now. So solving problems like that were a big part, and it'll be that way. We can always change it with it, like with any of this stuff. If it doesn't work, there's a cost associated, but we can change it back. But so far, the data is showing that it works.
It doesn't seem to be as bad going the other way. Now that I think about it, if you're going east on West Street,
same thing. Yeah. there's less congestion.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So on both sides,
I don't know. I actually don't know because I didn't pay attention if they changed it to go the other way as well.
Make it into a turn lane.
But when you think about like the ability for people to stay there and turn now, it's going to free up the other direction as well too.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about 6 minutes left. Let's talk quickly if we could. So the striping, folks, based on the information we have right now, is coming up this coming Friday. You will begin to notice a change in the traffic pattern on Woodstock Avenue.
Yeah, you'll most likely see the majority of it on Saturday morning. Just to be clear.
Hotels. I guess we got to sort of talk about that a little bit. We did spend some time in previous shows talking about the hotel that we hope is going to be built where the pit is now, but we're talking about the other hotels, which right now are housing unfortunate folks, and it just sort of continues to be done, and it's still an issue, I'm sure, for law enforcement. Although I haven't heard as much lately, I have to be honest. I don't know whether it's sort of falling into a pattern or not.
Well, you can come to our RUTSTAT meetings every other Tuesday. So the next RUTSTAT meeting, if you're listening to the show, will be this coming Tuesday. Yes, I think this coming Tuesday. Look at the PD's website for the correct date. But the idea is that we keep good track of it now. So if there are incidents and there are issues, we're keeping good track of it. The city's taken some bold steps. I've had my building and zoning team, specifically my building inspectors, my health inspectors, going to make sure that these hotels are not just up to code for what a voucher resident would want, but up to code for what a traveling person would want, what we call transient. So like if you go on a business trip or if your family coming to go skiing at Killington, these hotels are licensed and permitted as hotels, not as homeless shelters. So there is a different set of standards there, right? Like a homeless shelter, you could have a cot. You don't need a full bed. So our building inspection team has been going out for the past 2 or 3 months and closing down sections of these hotels, not entire hotels, but sections of these hotels where the quality of living is subpar. And we've seen great results. So one of them was the Pine Tree Lodge, and we had to close down, I think it was 6 rooms there. And actually one space was being used as rooms, and we said, no, you can't use this because it wasn't registered. And they've gone in and completely renovated these units, just made them look fantastic. And my hope is that as the program starts to wind down, because it's 80 days from July 1st. So by mid-September, we're going to see this program. Vouchers are out and gone until adverse weather. There is no vouchers left. If you've used your 80 days, you got nothing. So people will start to go back to families. They'll start to go back to living with their cousin or their uncle. As that happens, we can start to bring these hotels back online for customers. And you always hear the comment, well, they're so messy, they're never going to get them turned around. Well, in all reality, these hotels have gathered a lot of revenue over the past 5 years, and that revenue is sitting there. And our hope is that we get them back online. If these hotel rooms are not up to snuff for somebody who's traveling to come and stay in them, and that's the standard that we are allowed to hold them to, then they will not be allowed to rent that room. And that hits their pocket, especially with this program being over. So we want to make sure, and we are working with the hotel owners, they've been great. We want to make sure that these rooms are up to quality standards, and you're seeing this Rutland Town doing something similar, but we want to make sure these rooms are up to quality standards. So we're continuing those inspections, and we're continuing putting that quality pressure on these hotels, because we don't want people coming to Rutland and saying, oh, those hotels were disgusting. We want them coming here and saying, what a great place to stay. And as the voucher program does end in September, there's no Hail Mary left, right? The legislature voted for this. We'll see those people vacating shortly, self-resolving, as the governor says, going back home to their friends and family, going back to, maybe some of them are from northern Vermont, some are from other parts of Rutland County, some are from out of state. And that's all, we have some of the data now to show that that's the case. As they self-resolve, we need those rooms back online for people to come to a bowling tournament or go skiing on the mountain this winter or come for foliage. Those need to be available, and they need to be available now.
The last report I had, the one in Mendon, they did get their permit, I believe, from the state.
Right.
Because there really wasn't any good legal reason not to. but I don't think they've begun to accept people in yet.
No, they're still under renovations from what I understand as well. The city was involved in that to look at making sure that no contaminants entered our waterway. So that hotel is right in part of our watershed. And for those who don't know, most of our water comes from Mendon Brook, or actually, for the most part, all of our water comes from Mendon Brook. So that's in the watershed. So if we were concerned that if people moved from the Cortina and they moved their cars that were leaking oil, like you see down at the Cortina, and they moved them up to Mendon, it could be problematic. So we had to put some pretty strict restrictions on what type of cars can be parked in a parking lot up there because of that.
Okay, we got one more minute. Anything we need to mention that we haven't, or?
No, just there's one Friday Night Live left in August. If you go to the Rutland Partnerships website, Downtown Rutland Partnerships website, you can check out the date and the band.
Must be it's either the 23rd or the 30th.
Yeah.
Because those are the only two Fridays left.
Yeah. So,
and then there's one in September.
I think it's the September one, because the August one was last week.
Okay.
So the September one, I think it's early September, and I think just make sure you get out, have a good time, enjoy a little bit of that weather, that nice summery weather that's left, and head downtown and have a little fun.
Okay. Mike Doenges, Rutland City Mayor, thank you very much for joining us today. We will try not to let the time go by as much as we have, because I do like to kind of check in monthly. So hopefully we'll have some time in September.
Great.
To have you back and find out how things are going with all sorts of projects that you have going.
I would love it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Brian.
And we will see you all next Sunday for another edition of Catamount Community Connection.